The sound of gunfire crackled in the distance as Lucas Blackwood dismounted his horse at the edge of his ranch, squinting against the harsh Arizona sun that beat down on the parched earth of 1875. He'd grown accustomed to the solitude of his 20 acres, the company of his cattle and the occasional visit from neighboring ranchers being all the social interaction he needed since returning from the war a decade ago. Lucas unsaddled his horse, his calloused hands working methodically as his mind wandered to the letter he'd received last week from his cousin in Boston. Another mail-order bride arrangement had fallen through when the prospective groom discovered his bride to be was 34, considered practically an old maid by society's harsh standards. The woman was stranded at the Tucson station, with nowhere to go. "Not my problem," Lucas muttered to his horse, leading the animal to water. He had enough troubles keeping his ranch afloat without taking in strays, regardless of how unfortunate their circumstances might be. The next morning dawned with the quiet intensity that Lucas had come to appreciate about desert life. He was halfway through his morning coffee when the distant rumble of wagon wheels caught his attention. Visitors were rare enough to put him on alert, and he reached for his rifle out of habit before stepping onto the porch. The approaching wagon was driven by old Jeremiah from town, and beside him sat a woman in a dusty blue traveling dress, her posture straight despite what must have been an exhausting journey. Lucas cursed under his breath. His cousin had obviously taken his silence as agreement. "Morning, Lucas," Jeremiah called cheerfully, bringing the wagon to a halt. "Special delivery from Tucson. Your cousin paid me handsomely to bring Miss Sophia Winters out to you." The woman Sophia met Lucas's gaze with an expression that combined dignity with unmistakable trepidation. She wasn't what he'd expected. Her chestnut hair was neatly pinned beneath a practical hat, and though there were fine lines at the corners of her eyes, they seemed to speak more of laughter than age. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice steady, "I understand this is unexpected. Your cousin mentioned you might provide temporary lodging while I determined my next steps." Lucas shot Jeremiah a look that could have curdled milk. "Did he now? Seems my cousin is making decisions for me from 3,000 miles away." "I don't wish to impose," Sophia said, gathering her skirts to descend from the wagon without assistance. "If you could simply point me toward the nearest town with accommodations, I'll trouble you no further." Something in her voice, pride without arrogance, dignity in the face of rejection, struck a chord in Lucas. He'd seen too many good people broken by circumstance not to recognize courage when he saw it. "The nearest town is half a day's ride, and there's a storm brewing," he said gruffly, noting the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "You might as well stay the night. We can figure things out tomorrow." Relief flickered across Sophia's face before she masked it with a polite nod. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I'm handy in a kitchen if you'll allow me to earn my keep." Lucas grunted noncommittally, helping Jeremiah unload her trunk, surprisingly modest for a woman who'd planned to start a new life in the West. As the wagon departed, leaving them in an awkward silence, Lucas wondered what he'd gotten himself into. "This way," he said, lifting her trunk with ease. "It's not much, but it's dry and reasonably clean." Sophia followed him into the sturdy log house. It was indeed clean, though sparse. A main room with a stone fireplace, kitchen area, and 2 doors leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. "You'll take my room," Lucas said, pushing open one of the doors. "I'll sleep out here." "I couldn't possibly. It's not negotiable, madam," he interrupted. "My mother would haunt me if I put a lady on the floor." A hint of a smile touched Sophia's lips. "You mentioned your mother in the present tense. Is she nearby?" Lucas paused, momentarily caught off guard. "Force of habit. She passed during the war." "I'm sorry," Sophia said, and the simple sincerity in her voice made him uncomfortable with its genuineness. "Best get settled," he said brusquely. "Supper's at sundown." True to her word, by the time Lucas returned from the barn, Sophia had taken charge of the kitchen. The smell of fresh biscuits and stew filled the house, a startling improvement over his usual fare of beans and jerky. You didn't need to do this, he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. Cooking relaxes me, she replied without looking up from the pot she was stirring. And I suspect you've been living on bachelor fare for too long. Lucas couldn't argue with that assessment. They ate in relative silence, though it was surprisingly comfortable. He found himself studying her when she wasn't looking the graceful way she handled herself, the intelligence in her hazel eyes. Why weren't you married before now? He asked abruptly, then immediately regretted the blunt question. Sophia set her spoon down carefully. I was engaged once at 22. He died of influenza a month before our wedding. By the time I was ready to consider marriage again, I was past the age most men find desirable. I spent my 20s caring for my ailing parents and my early 30s teaching at a girls' school in Boston. She met his eyes directly. When both my parents passed last year, I found myself alone with few prospects. The advertisement for Western brides seemed like an opportunity for a new beginning. Until the grooms saw your age, Lucas said. Yes. Her smile held no self-pity. Apparently 34 is ancient when one is seeking a bride of childbearing age. Though I assured Mr. Pendleton I was perfectly capable in that department, he had already set his sights on a younger woman who arrived on the same train. The matter-of-fact way she described her rejection stirred something in Lucas' anger on her behalf, perhaps, or recognition of a similar resignation he'd felt when the war left him too damaged inside to pursue the future he'd once envisioned. His loss, Lucas said gruffly, surprising himself. They settled into an unexpected routine over the next few days. The promised storm had arrived, making travel inadvisable and giving Sophia a reprieve from immediate decisions about her future. Lucas found himself increasingly impressed by her adaptability. She didn't complain about the rustic conditions or seem fazed by the isolation. On the third morning, he came in from tending the animals to find her examining his account books with a frown. I hope you don't mind, she said, looking up at his entrance. I was searching for paper to write some letters. And found my disastrous bookkeeping instead? Your system is creative, she said diplomatically. I taught arithmetic at the school. Perhaps I could help organize these? By midday, Sophia had created a clear picture of his financial situation which was more precarious than Lucas had been willing to admit to himself. The cattle operation was barely breaking even, and his savings were dwindling. You need additional income streams, she said, tapping the ledger. What else can this land produce? The question launched a conversation that lasted through dinner and into the evening. Lucas found himself sharing ideas he'd never voiced aloud, expanding into horses, perhaps, or growing specific crops suited to the arid conditions. You've given this considerable thought, Sophia observed. Lucas shrugged. Thinking's free. Implementing costs money I don't have. Perhaps not all at once, she said thoughtfully, but in stages. For the first time in years, Lucas felt a spark of possibility. It was dangerous, he knew, allowing himself to imagine a different future, especially one that included the woman sitting across from him, her face animated as she calculated figures on a scrap of paper. The storm passed, but Lucas found reasons to delay taking Sophia to town. The road would be muddy. There was a bridge that might be washed out. They should wait until the weekly supply wagon came through to see if there was news from Tucson. Sophia didn't push, and each day she found new ways to make herself useful. She reorganized his pantry, mended clothes he'd set aside as too damaged to wear, and started a small kitchen garden with seeds she found in an old tin. A week stretched into 2, and Lucas realized with alarm that he'd grown accustomed to her presence, the sound of her humming as she worked, the fresh scent of lavender she'd somehow coaxed from a scraggly plant near the water pump, the way the house felt like a home again. One evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, Sophia broke their comfortable silence. I should leave soon, she said quietly. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Lucas's chest tightened at her words. You're not imposing. You've been more help than hindrance, Nevertheless, I can't stay indefinitely without preparations. A faint blush colored her cheeks. People will talk. Let them, Lucas said, more forcefully than he intended. There's no one for 50 miles whose opinion matters to me. Sophia turned to study him, her expression unreadable in the fading light. What about your opinion, Lucas? Does it matter to you, living outside society's bounds? It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something shifted between them with those two syllables. I stopped caring about society's bounds when I watched good men die for causes that meant nothing in the end, he said. What matters is here and now. This land. Surviving. And he stopped, uncertain how to articulate what her presence had come to mean. And, she prompted softly, having someone who sees the potential in things others would discard, he finished, meeting her eyes directly. The next morning, Lucas rode to check on a break in the fence line at the northern boundary of his property. His mind was still replaying their conversation from the previous evening, analyzing what had been said and what had remained unspoken. He returned earlier than expected, and as he approached the house, he heard Sophia's voice raised in alarm. Drawing his pistol, Lucas dismounted swiftly and moved toward the sound. What he found was not danger, but Sophia standing in the yard facing down his temperamental bull that had somehow gotten loose from its pen. She held a broom in one hand and was speaking in a firm, measured tone that somehow kept the massive animal at bay. Easy now, she was saying. There's no need for unpleasantness. Back to your pen, if you please. Incredibly, the bull seemed to be listening, though it pawed the ground occasionally as if debating whether to charge. Lucas moved carefully to her side. That's not a typical Boston school teacher skill, he said quietly, taking her arm to slowly guide her backward. You'd be surprised what managing a classroom of 30 girls prepares you for, she replied, never taking her eyes off the bull. Firmness without fear seems to work on most males, regardless of species. Together they managed to herd the bull back to its enclosure. When the gate was secured, Lucas turned to find Sophia leaning against the fence, her composure finally giving way to trembling hands. You're shaking, he observed. Delayed reaction, she admitted. I was terrified, but showing fear seemed unwise. Without thinking, Lucas reached out to steady her, his hands warm on her shoulders. You're braver than most men I've known. Not brave, she corrected. Practical. Panic rarely improves a situation. Her pragmatism pulled a genuine laugh from him, a sound so foreign to his own ears that it momentarily startled him. Sophia smiled in response, and something in Lucas's chest unraveled a little further. I think, he said slowly, that I'd like you to stay. Not as a guest or a temporary arrangement, but permanently. Sophia went very still under his hands. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Blackwood? A partnership, he said, the words coming more easily than he'd expected. This ranch needs both of us. Your head for figures and planning, my knowledge of the land. We could build something here that neither of us could manage alone. A business arrangement. Her voice was carefully neutral. Lucas shook his head. More than that. A life. Together. He took a deep breath. I'm asking you to marry me, Sophia. Not because you need a place to stay or because I need help with the books, but because these past weeks have shown me what my life could be with you in it. Sophia's eyes widened. You hardly know me. I know enough, he countered. I know you're resilient and resourceful. I know you face challenges head-on. I know you see possibilities instead of limitations. He paused. And I know that for the first time in years, I'm thinking about tomorrow instead of just surviving today. Tears gathered in Sophia's eyes. The age difference doesn't concern you? I'm 34, Lucas. My childbearing years are... I'm 38, he interrupted. Old enough to know that family comes in many forms. If we're blessed with children, I'll be grateful. If not, we'll still have each other and whatever life we build here. A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. "You're not proposing out of pity?" Lucas cupped her face gently. "The only pity I feel is for the fool who let you go in Tucson." 2 weeks later, they were married by a traveling preacher who stopped at the ranch on a circuit. The ceremony was simple, just the two of them, the preacher and old Jeremiah as witness, but Sophia wore flowers in her hair, and Lucas had polished his boots until they shone. "I never expected to find happiness again," Sophia confessed that night as they sat by the fire, her head resting against his shoulder. "When Mr. Pendleton rejected me in Tucson, I thought perhaps I was meant to be alone." "His rejection led you here," Lucas said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "To me, sometimes what looks like misfortune is just a different path to where you're meant to be." Their first year together was not without challenges. A drought threatened the cattle, and bandits stole 3 of their best horses. But they faced each problem as a team, combining Lucas's practical experience with Sophia's strategic thinking. Following her suggestion, they diversified the ranch operations. Lucas began breaking and training horses, developing a reputation for producing reliable mounts. Sophia started making preserves and cheese to sell to passing wagon trains, saving the profits to implement more of their plans. By their first anniversary, the ranch's finances had stabilized enough to hire a part-time hand, a young man named Joshua, who had a way with horses and was willing to work for room, board, and modest wages. "I have something for you," Lucas said that evening after Joshua had retired to the small cabin they'd built for him. He presented Sophia with a small wooden box he'd crafted himself. Inside was a silver locket containing a tintype of the two of them taken when a photographer had passed through the area months earlier. "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered, touching the polished surface reverently. "There's something else," Lucas said, suddenly nervous. "I've been thinking about names." Sophia looked puzzled. "Names? For the baby," he explained gently, resting his hand on her stomach, where the first subtle swell was just becoming visible. "If you're agreeable, I'd like to honor my mother if it's a girl." Tears of joy filled Sophia's eyes. "You noticed?" "I was waiting until I was certain before telling you." "I notice everything about you," Lucas said, drawing her into his arms. "How tired you've been in the mornings. How you've stopped drinking coffee. The way your dresses are fitting differently." He paused. "Are you happy about it?" "Overjoyed," she admitted, "but also frightened. At my age, childbearing carries additional risks." "We'll take every precaution," Lucas promised. "I've already sent for a proper doctor to visit regularly, not just the midwife." "You've thought of everything," Sophia said, clearly touched by his concern. "I've had a lot of practice worrying about you," he replied with a smile. 6 months later, after a difficult but ultimately successful labor, Sophia gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Elizabeth Rose Blackwood. Lucas, who had paced outside during the entire ordeal, was awestruck when the doctor finally allowed him to enter the bedroom. Sophia looked exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle against her chest. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Lucas approached cautiously, overwhelmed by the surge of emotions as he gazed down at the perfect, tiny face. "She's beautiful," he whispered, gently touching the wisp of dark hair on the baby's head. "Just like her mother." "She has your chin," Sophia observed, tracing the baby's delicate features. "And I think she'll have your determination. She certainly fought her way into this world." As Lucas carefully took his daughter into his arms for the first time, he was struck by how completely his life had transformed in less than 2 years. From solitary rancher barely getting by to husband, father, and owner of an increasingly prosperous operation, all because a mail-order bride had been rejected for being too old. "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked, watching him with their daughter. "That I'm the luckiest man in the Arizona territory," Lucas replied honestly. "And that Mr. Pendleton did me the greatest favor of my life when he decided you weren't suitable." Sophia laughed softly. "Perhaps we should send him a thank you note, or a bill for the wedding," Lucas suggested with a grin, since he inadvertently arranged it. Life settled into a new rhythm with Elizabeth's arrival. Lucas found himself rising earlier to complete his chores so he could spend more time with his daughter. Sophia managed the household and ranch accounts with the baby often nestled in a sling across her chest. When Elizabeth was 6 months old, they received an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed man arrived in a rented carriage, introducing himself as William Pendleton, the very man who had rejected Sophia in Tucson. "I've come to make amends," he explained awkwardly, standing on their porch. "My young bride." "Well, she departed with a traveling salesman 3 months after our wedding, taking most of my valuables with her." Lucas fought the urge to slam the door in the man's face. "What does that have to do with us?" "I heard in town that Miss Winters had found employment at this ranch," Pendleton continued. "I wish to offer her a proper proposal this time. I've realized my error in judgment." Before Lucas could respond, Sophia appeared in the doorway with Elizabeth in her arms. "That's Mrs. Blackwood now," she said calmly. "And I'm afraid you're too late, Mr. Pendleton. My husband and I are quite happily married." Pendleton's eyes widened as he took in the domestic scene. "I see. I apologize for the intrusion." "No apology necessary," Sophia replied with genuine warmth. "In fact, we owe you our gratitude. Had you not rejected me, I might never have found my way here to the home and family I was truly meant to have." After Pendleton departed, Lucas pulled Sophia close, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby between them. "You're remarkable," he said. "I would have told him exactly where to go and how quickly to get there." "What would be the point?" Sophia asked pragmatically. "Bitterness serves no purpose. Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, seeing his face when he realized what he had lost was satisfaction enough. As Elizabeth grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. They added a proper guest room to the house and expanded the garden. Sophia started a small school for the children of neighboring ranchers and their new ranch hands, teaching 3 days a week in a converted shed. On Elizabeth's 3rd birthday, as they watched her playing with the wooden horses Lucas had carved for her, Sophia took her husband's hand with a meaningful squeeze. "I have news," she said softly. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have another baby in the winter." Lucas's face lit with joy as he gathered her into his arms. "Are you certain? Is everything well?" "Everything is perfect," she assured him. "The doctor says I'm as healthy as a woman 10 years younger." 7 months later, in the midst of a rare desert snowfall, their son William Lucas Blackwood was born, robust and loud from his first breath. 2 healthy children at my age, Sophia marveled as they watched the baby sleeping beside his sister, who had insisted on staying close to her new brother. "I never imagined such blessings were possible. You've brought more joy to this ranch than I ever thought possible," Lucas said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just with the children, but with everything you are: your strength, your wisdom, your ability to see the good in people and possibilities." "We built this joy together," Sophia corrected gently. "You gave me a chance when others saw only my age. You looked beyond convention to see me as I truly am." As their family grew, so did their reputation in the territory. The Blackwood Ranch became known for its fine horses, quality beef, and Sophia's preserves, which won ribbons at the territorial fair. Their home became a stopping place for travelers, and their school expanded to include a proper building and, occasionally, an additional teacher. 5 years after William's birth, when they had settled into the comfortable assumption that their family was complete, Sophia surprised Lucas with news of another pregnancy. Though concerned about the risks at her age, the doctor monitored her carefully, and twin girls Sarah and Lydia arrived safely, completing their family. On their 15th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children playing in the yard, Elizabeth, now a thoughtful young woman of 14, William, an energetic 11-year-old, and the twins' delightful 5-year-olds Lucas reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Remember that first week you were here?" he asked, taking Sophia's hand. "When I asked why you weren't married before?" Sophia nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "I told you about my fiancé who died, and caring for my parents. You said you were past the age most men find desirable," Lucas recalled. "I've thought about that many times over the years." "And?" Sophia prompted, curious about his reflective mood. "I think some treasures aren't meant to be found by just anyone," he said. "They wait for the person who can truly value them." He pressed a kiss to her temple, now threaded with silver. "Every day, I thank whatever fate brought you to my door." Sophia smiled, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Some might call it chance, or even misfortune, being stranded in Tucson. "I call it the beginning of everything that matters," Lucas replied. As the stars emerged above their home, a home built on second chances and unexpected joy, Lucas Blackwood realized that the greatest adventure of his life had begun the day a mail-order bride, rejected for her age, had brought light and purpose to his solitary existence. In the years that followed, their ranch would grow into one of the most successful in the territory. Their children would make them proud in countless ways. But nothing would ever surpass the simple miracle of two lonely souls finding each other against all odds, proving that love recognizes no boundaries, not age, not circumstance, not the harsh judgments of a world too quick to discard what it fails to truly see.